Hey everybody, Steve here with another Fantasy Critic update. So 2020 leagues are already open on the site, but before we get too far into the season, I do want to go over some of the new features that are available for this year. So those include new options when you're creating your league and new features that make it easier to draft and to manage your draft. First, let's talk about the new options for league creation. So I'm going to go to create a league here. So this has been around. So you can choose how many players you want to play and you think are going to play in the league. But now you also get this game mode slider, which sets some options as like a baseline for what you might want to choose if your players are new to Fantasy Critic, maybe new to Fantasy Critic, but very knowledgeable about video games, and then the like high level of advanced where you think that everyone pretty much knows what they're doing. Now, what does that change? That mostly changes how many games are going to be recommended to be chosen per player. So with 6 people in a league at the advanced tier, that shows 18 games per player, 8 of which will be chosen at the draft, which means 10 pickup games and 2 counter picks. Standard takes it down to 6 at the draft, 6 pickup games, and beginner takes it down to 7 overall, with 4 of them being taken at the draft, 3 pickup games. Beginner also turns off counter picks. You can choose whatever you want based on this, but the idea with the slider is to give people a baseline. Next up is the new dropping system. And I admit that this is a little complicated to go over, to have all these different categories of what is and what is not droppable, but I want it to be as flexible as possible to let league managers and the leagues choose what they want. So there's 3 types of games, there's 3 types of categories for a droppable game. And you can set any of those 3 to a number, including 0, or unlimited. So the most basic would be to do this. Would be to do something like this. Nothing is droppable. 0s across the board, nothing is unlimited. When you do this, there's no dropping allowed at all. The least restricted would be to make unlimited, unrestricted drops. What that means is anything you want at any time, provided the game hasn't come out. You can never drop a game that's already been released or that already has a score. Never. Those are never droppable. An unrestricted, unlimited droppable means that whether a game is planned to come out or has been delayed and will not come out in 2020, you can drop that. You can drop as many of those as you want. The 2 other categories of will release and will not release lets you choose if a game, for the will not release, if a game is not going to come out in 2020, it's been delayed, how many of those can you drop? I want to be able to drop 4. I want to be able to drop 2. Or I want to be able to drop as many of those as I want. And then there's specifically games that will release. If I want to say every year you get to drop 2 games that still are planned to come out, you can put will release 2, and then depending on what you want for will not release, and you can choose 0 or unlimited or whatever you want for those. But it's games that will come out, show up as will release. That's how many you can drop. If it's not coming out in 2020, it's based on the will not release. And then the unrestricted, if you don't care about the distinction, you just want to say don't drop anything or be able to drop everything, you can choose that. So next up is the eligibility settings. Now, these haven't changed in the past few months, but they definitely have changed since the beginning of last year. So there's a couple options I want to go over if you haven't seen them, and also just make some recommendations. So the first thing is the maximum eligibility level, which concerns whether a game is a new game or a remake or a remaster and everything in between. The 0 is completely new game. Would not even allow a game like Resident Evil 2 Remake. I think that's too restrictive, but you're free to make that choice. Same thing with the 1. It's the 1 is a complete remake. You don't allow anything that is less of a remake, at least by my definition, than something like Resident Evil 2. So a game like Link's Awakening for Switch also wouldn't be allowed. The 2 is my recommended setting. This allows, when a game's at 2, it's a remake and is going to be scored as if it were being judged on modern criteria. It's not just going to be basically the score of the original game got. I really do think that these are new enough games. The things past that, I can understand someone setting to 3. That allows some things like the Crash Insane trilogy or Crash Team Racing from last year. Once you get into the 4 and the 5s, we're talking about actual remasters like Gears of War Ultimate Edition or Master Chief Collection. The 5 is where I go back to warning you, don't do this, because these games are hard to classify. When a game is a straight-up port, just like this game has been on PC for 2 years and now it's coming out on Switch, and it's the same game. Often OpenCritic doesn't even add a new page for that, so it's like, what score do you deserve for this game when it doesn't get re-reviewed by most outlets? So I recommend keep it at 2 or 3 is what I would do personally. And then you also, if there's a specific game that you want to individually allow or individually ban, there are ways to do that on the site these days, where you can specifically say, this game is eligible, this game is not eligible. I don't care what my other settings are. You can do that in the league management pages. Down here, the other 5 options are allowing yearly installments. Now, this means things like sports franchises, some racing games that literally have the year in the title. It does not mean games that usually come out every year. I think Call of Duty is different enough from year to year. Assassin's Creed is different enough from year to year that it doesn't count as the same thing as FIFA or Madden or MLB The Show or F1 2019 or Football Manager 2020. I don't see them as the same thing. You can specifically disallow those games if you want. The Call of Duties and the Assassin's Creeds that is. Early access games is the next one, and this has gotten some confusion in the past. If you check this off, this disallows games that are currently, at the moment of they're being drafted or the moment they're being bid upon, if they're already playable at that time, you can't take them, if that's checked off. If a game is planned for early access, but it's not in early access yet, you can always take that. The idea here is you don't want to be able to draft a game that you can just go play right now. That's not much of a bet if you've played it. Free-to-play sometimes are hard to review, and I can see people wanting to shy away from them because they don't get, not all of them are going to get scores. They're not all going to get reviewed by major outlets. Games that are already released in other regions. So if a game comes out in Japan, or it already came out in early 2019, and it's going to come out in mid 2020 in the US, you can choose whether or not you want to allow that, because you could get an idea for what that game's like by reading reviews from another country. And last is expansion packs. Now, expansion packs, there's different levels of them, and it was getting too complicated about having different levels of expansion packs, like different levels of remakes and such. So now it's just, if a game's an expansion pack at all, or a DLC at all, it gets classified as such, and that check mark will allow you to allow or disallow those. So that's all the league creation options that I wanted to go over. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the improvements to the way that the process of drafting works. So last year, when you wanted to draft a game, you would have to click on draft game, then search for something, and then select it. And you have to do that every time. Now, we have the option to just show me the top available games. And this will show you in descending order of hype factor, so the most popular on the site, what are the games that are still available. You can page through them and go ahead and just choose one. So that should make things faster. Also, you can create a watch list of games that you that you're looking at, that you want to have easy access to. So before the draft, or when it's not your turn, you can populate your watch list with games that you're planning on drafting. No one else can see it, and then you can just really quickly take something. So it's really easy to add games to the watch list, either before the draft starts or while you're drafting, whether it's your turn or not. You can go to add game to watch list, and I can just search for, let's grab Resident Evil. The new one. Where's Resident Evil 3? That's what I want. Here we go. So I want Resident Evil 3, and now it's on my list. So now that I've added that to my watch list, I can just go to draft game, show my watch list, and there's Resident Evil 3 right there. So I can go ahead and draft that. So this is intended to make things a little bit faster and easier in the drafting process, particularly if you're on mobile and you don't have easy access to switch between a couple tabs. Should make things easier. Now, what's next? These two features added together, where I can easily see what the next highest ranked game is, and have a per player queue of what games they're planning on drafting. I don't know when I'm going to have this done, but I'm going to work on an auto pick feature where a player can choose to set themselves on auto pick, and then whenever it becomes their turn, it will choose the highest ranked game in their watch list for them that is still available. And if there are no games in their watch list, or there are no games that are available in their watch list, it'll take the highest hype factor game. I know a lot of people have asked for this because not everyone is on the same time zone. It can be difficult to get a group together. So I don't no ETA on that, but hopefully I'll have that done soon-ish. So that's it for the new features. The last thing I want to go over briefly is Critics Royale. So 2019 is just about wrapped up. In fact, we have a clear winner. Congratulations to Hall with the publisher Duck Division winning decisively with 145 points. I think that Critics Royale went well. I like the feature. There's not going to be any new features for Q1 2020. It'll work, and it'll work the same way that it did this past quarter. But new features and changes for Critics Royale are going to have to wait until Q2 2020 because I just don't have time before the beginning of January to get anything new in. I've got some ideas for how to make it more interesting, but hopefully it was fun enough because it's what we're going to have for the next 3 months, the way it is now. That's it. If you have any questions, I'm very available either on our new Discord, Fantasy Critic Discord, always accessible on Twitter and Reddit as well. So happy drafting. Hope you're enjoying the site. Thanks.